Hello and welcome to VAB's spring webinar series, Investing in Measurable Success. I'm Ben Vandergrift, VP Measurement Solutions and Innovations at VAB. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Throughout this four-part webinar series, we will be talking to industry experts who will explore and share winning investment strategies for marketers so that you can stay informed and translate trends into actionable business-driving strategies. You have joined day one of our four-part series, and we'd love to see you at all of the sessions, which you can register for on the VAB.com. With that said, I'm joined today by three stellar executives who know a few things about our topic today, which is CTV. Maureen, Kurt, and Peter, thank you so much for being with us here today. If you don't mind, if you could each introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, where you work, and what you do there. Maureen, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Maureen Bosetti. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at IPG Mediabrands. So I oversee all of our investment strategy and activation here at IPG.
Great. Kurt.
Yeah, sure. Kurt Robinson. I'm at Swoop. I act as the Executive Vice President of Business Development. So I oversee all of the partnerships with our activation partners and distribution partners to get audiences into the hands of our partners that use them.
And Peter.
Yeah, I'm Pete Crofut, and I'm with Wurl, which is owned by AppLovin, and I oversee our agency and brand business.
All right, thanks, Pete. All right, so thank you, everybody. So CTV is obviously a very hot topic today, a topic that the VAB we just explored in a recent report called What is CTV? And in that report, one of the things we explore is how CTV is one of the fastest growing ad platforms in the United States today, due in large part to audience behaviors shifting with lightning speed. So 90% of US households now have at least one CTV device, which is up from less than 40% a decade ago. And marketers are following suit. Since 2021, CTV ad investment has doubled to over $33 billion, comprising over 40% of the total TV marketplace. But if we zoom out a bit, by next year, 2026, it's projected that CTV will account for 20% of time spent with media per day in the US, but it will still only garner 8.1% of total ad spend. So, Maureen, do you anticipate brands increasing their ad spend in CTV and seeing that total of share of ad spend grow as we head into the upfronts? And what role should CTV play in an advertiser's holistic media plan? All right, two-part question to kick us off.
Yeah, definitely. First and foremost, yes, absolutely. I see CTV growing as part of the share, not just in the upfront, but of the total video allocation. As you said, we are kind of a little bit behind in terms of the time spent relative to the share of spend. So while I don't see the gap fully closing in the next 12 months, I definitely see an increase on share, so that it should definitely be more than half of the spend. And when it comes to the upfront spend, right, that it should be more than half. And we're seeing that time spent is certainly more than half. When you look at just, what's the competition with linear or online videos. So definitely see that increasing, because the role of CTV can play many different roles. It can be a reach driver, right? We can really certainly aggregate reach across multiple partners, but it could also be used as a consideration driver. It can be used for lower funnel tactics. It can be used to reach specific audiences with geo-targeting. So the great thing about CTV is that it really can combine the best of, again, getting that reach from linear, but also driving lower funnel tactics within the ecosystem.
So a nice balance of branding and performance.
Definitely.
So, Pete, I want to bring the next question to you, and thinking about speed and scalability, which is obviously going to be an important part for any marketer that's driving into any particular ad medium. So more and more players are providing ad-supported models for consumers who are engaging with CTV. Can you talk to us a bit how this expansion is creating opportunities for advertisers, and are there any challenges arising from this expansion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it's really an honor and privilege to be here today. So as our parent company is AppLovin, one of the largest mobile performance marketing companies in the world, we know quite a bit about gaps in performance and also some of the opportunities that sit in front of marketers and us as an industry. And one of the areas that we think about a lot are fast channels. We're at Wurl, one of the largest operators of those fast channels. And we're thinking about, the opportunity for more personalization within that medium. And as we know what those gaps in performance are, right, we're thinking about how do we close them for specifically ROAS campaigns in CTV. So we recently put out a trends report on ad fill and performance. And so, we see fast growing in the CTV ecosystem. So that's one opportunity. And that creates newer and bigger opportunities for audiences to reach advertisers, especially in the largest screen in the home and a non-skippable 30-second environment. It's really important to get personalization right. What we see is some of the challenges is we still see hesitations persist around the efficacy of FAST and whether or not it can be what we've heard is truly considered as premium inventory. And, we see the answers now as yes, it can be. And we're seeing more premium content come to FAST. And in our trends report, we also found that fill rates are still lower on the trend than previous years. And that suggests a lot of room for growth ahead in the ecosystem. So we don't see FAST slowing down, and there's a lot of scale and a lot of room for innovation in that medium.
That's great. So FAST is really opening up a lot of opportunities for marketers. And
yes.
Yep. So Kurt, over to you. Same question, right? Gaining opportunities.
Yeah, no, I think you sort of have two trends at once, really, that are driving the CTV scale and the increase there, right? You have the adoption of, new enabled CTV devices. And now you have the expansion of ad-supported video content at the same time, right? So you've got the likes of Amazon and Netflix in particular that are really creating a lot more opportunities to tap into that type of inventory within great, really premium environments. And this doesn't really necessarily solve for fragmentation, but we really think that's where audiences can step in to be that common thread across these disparate channels and really ensure that you're reaching who is truly your potential customers, right where they are, right?
Maureen, anything you'd like to add on there about the growing opportunity?
Yeah, no, I agree. As you said, especially we have a lot of healthcare clients, and really making sure that we can leverage that data, with partners like Swoop, and increasing, right? It's all about incrementality right now. How do we get that incremental reach? And CTV is a key component of our media plans in order to do that. So I completely agree that the audience component of it is critical in driving that incremental reach.
Great. I think that's a perfect segue into our next question here, which is really about targeting advanced audiences in CTV. And as you all mentioned, right, one of the benefits of CTV is the ability it has to reach and measure audiences, right? And when we think about advanced audiences, such as those, right, if we get into really the brass tacks of it, it's like folks with a household income of 150,000 plus and are also in the market for a pickup truck, or pet owners with an affinity for luxury clothing, for example, not just traditional age and gender metrics, which is a change for some advertisers who have historically leaned into those specific types of targets, right, age and gender, for targeting and measurement. So as advertisers lean into CTV, how should they be thinking about, right, those advanced audiences versus traditional age and gender? Kurt, we'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, sure. So as Maureen mentioned, right, we focus on supporting the healthcare category and really pharma advertisers specifically, right? So there's tremendous clarity in terms of who the potential customers are for those marketers, right? They may be hard to find, but you know who they are. Someone qualifies or they don't, right? And age and gender, I think the reality is that those two data points really don't sum up any patient population, right, accurately. So, advanced audiences have really become necessary in efficiently understanding, analyzing, and reaching those targets that really have the potential to drive ROI for your brand.
And Pete, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the transition from traditional age and gender to advanced audiences in CTV?
Yeah, it's a great question. And from our point of view, we see an overdependence on audiences, and we also see an opportunity to expand just beyond the audiences. So when we think of a world of personalization and unskippable environments, the messaging and advertising, it needs to be relevant in order to drive performance. and data and contextual specifically. So when we think, we a lot of talk in our business about premium audiences, premium inventory. We think about the premium moments in that and how to better engage audiences to drive KPIs. And we think streaming TV combines the emotional impact and brand safety of traditional linear television, but with precision targeting, measurement capabilities, and really real-time optimization of digital marketing. And that's a real powerful combination that we think creates an unprecedented opportunity for performance marketers to drive measurable results while also, building awareness with the consumer and connection. And we think because of the digital nature, CTV offers ways to target beyond audiences at scale through contextual targeting. And for example, we're really focused on looking at the role emotion can play around in contextual on CTV. And we've seen in our testing and partnerships with agencies how that boosts performance and KPIs for brands.
I love the idea of a premium moment. Really interesting, kind of turning the idea of audience on its head there. Maureen, what about you? How are you thinking about audience and targeting and then with advanced audiences?
Yeah, I mean, it really varies, based on the client, but most of our clients, need to drive growth, business growth, or they need to protect their base. So for us, it all really starts with understanding, well, where is that growth going to come from? And what are the audience segments upon which we're going to find that incrementality? So it really does start with understanding the nuances of the audience base. And again, where are we going to find that growth? And then how do we translate that into actionable audience segments? And that's why it's so important that you really understand your growth audience, but then you're planning against that audience and ultimately activating and measuring against a consistent audience. So that consistency is important to get to that measurement and ultimately show what those business results are to a client. I think that's really kind of the lens by which we start with a lot of the work and ultimately measure it. And then certainly layering upon, I think contextual is incredibly interesting in this space, as well as personalization of the message upon that. But again, for us, it really starts with understanding what the audience is.
So really reverse engineering from those growth opportunities, finding the audiences that fit within that opportunity.
Yes.
Great. So Maureen, we're gonna stick with you here, and you touched on this earlier, right? Thinking about balancing branding and performance. How should brands think about that approach, right? How should they balance branding and performance with CTV? Is there a way to balance the two?
There's definitely a way to balance it. As I mentioned earlier, CTV is good at multiple aspects of the funnel and the balance, if you will, but I don't think there is any such thing as true balance. I think it really does come to really diagnosing what is the opportunity that marketer has to better understand, well, what has been the barrier to growth? Is it a consideration problem? Is it a loyalty problem? Is it an advocacy problem? Right. And so or is it an awareness problem, right? That could also be the challenge. So it really starts with diagnosing where is the greatest opportunity to drive that growth. And so it may mean that they're 20% on brand, 80% performance, and you're not balanced, right? You're very heavily leaned into performance because that's where you're going to find this greatest opportunity for growth. Or conversely, you really need to lean into consideration a lot more than maybe lower funnel tactics. So starts with that diagnosis, but again, it could be heavily leaning towards one or the other. And then you really understand, well, what are the right channels and tactics to solve those challenges? So in the case of CTV, if it is an awareness problem, then you really need to go heavy into high impact, maybe premium content, live, really leverage CTV for what it's good at in terms of driving awareness. But again, if it's a consideration, then maybe you're using some of the tactics like, whether it's addressable, right? Or I should say engagement ads, right? So maybe you're trying to drive to learn more information about a car, learn more information about taking this trip. So it also offers that opportunity to drive consideration. And now more and more, there's the opportunity to actually drive commerce. So CTV truly can pull you all the way through into that funnel, but it's that right combination of tactics to solve that challenge. But, again, if you don't understand what the challenges are, then the tactics are meaningless if you really don't understand what the challenge is and how to best solve it within the CTV space. But the great thing about CTV is that it can provide a lot of solutions based on those myriad of different opportunities for the marketer.
So it's not a one size fits all formula for branding and performance. Really, once again, laddering back to determining those KPIs and building from there.
Exactly.
Great. Kurt, how about you? What are your thoughts on the balancing branding and performance?
Yeah, going to agree again. I mean, if you start with sort of the, the mission critical objectives for a specific brand, and then you say, okay, now who is the target that I need to reach, and how and where do I best engage them, right? Like good things will happen, right? You're aligned to the right thing, sort of fundamentally. And then as it relates to CTV specifically, it really does give the precision, sort of that balance of precision and impact, right? You can target in an incredibly accurate way across a canvas, right? The TV glass where you can really tell a story. So, in pharma and healthcare, as we sort of look at the space, we look at it as sort of the best of both worlds, right? And then on top of that, it's also highly measurable, right? So you can evaluate that CTV spend against the same standards as your digital or display investments, right?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah.
So moving on, thinking, and we kind of touched on this already, right? From a creative strategy standpoint, Pete, are there any best practices for brands in terms of creative strategy on CTV compared to other video activations? Should they be thinking about the same, thinking about it differently? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I love talking about creative. It's near and dear to my heart. I think first of all, creatives need to really understand, and they get this in the brief and working closely with media and the client, really understanding as Maureen was talking about, is backing into what is that KPI? Is it awareness? Is it consideration? Are we trying to drive a purchase or an action? So I think from creative, knowing what worked and didn't, and then the ability, and this is new with artificial intelligence, is to understand the sentiment of the creative, right? And being able to score that so that when that ad shows up to that consumer, it's more personalized and the sentiment of the creative matches the sentiment of the content being watched. So learning what emotions are contained, making sure that you have matching of the emotion to the content. And I think, more importantly is we, and it's going to vary from client to client, but basically, if you have awareness or you're driving consideration, understanding what emotions or combinations of emotions can work to drive an outcome, but also how do we connect to hearts and minds and wallets using that strategy or tactic, and then taking those learnings forward, right? So we actually have been spending time now working with the creative community to see what resonated for attention, because we don't think that all attention is created equal. And I think creative is a great lever to create a positive attention versus disruptive or negative attention, and then building benchmarks around that to support brands' efforts.
Fascinating. So we kind of talked about this, Maureen, you mentioned it. And when we think about creatives that are very engaging, and Pete mentioned, right, hearts, minds, and also the wallet, right? And what immediately comes to mind for me is shoppable TV, shoppable ads in CTV. How are you leveraging any of those innovative interactive ad formats today? And how are you thinking about it for the future?
Yeah, we are obviously for the commerce brands. We are certainly partners like Amazon, right? Makes a ton of sense that we're leveraging their technology and their ecosystem. So the work that they're doing, we're certainly leaned in with Amazon, but there's other partners. Whether you look at like Roku, Disney, et cetera, NBCU, they're all really creating new commerce technology, whether it's through a QR code or other third-party partnerships that they're creating. So we're definitely leaning into the commerce space, just given that we ultimately do want to make that connection to purchase, obviously, and for the clients where it makes the most sense to lean into commerce. We are absolutely doing that, and we're really excited about even more innovation with more partners that's on the roadmap.
Yeah, that's super exciting space.
Yeah.
And thinking about one of the benefits of shoppable, like you mentioned, is right, that closed loop measurement. You totally understand who was exposed and then what they did afterwards. So Kurt, that has me thinking about your side of the business where, right, measurement, data, those targeting perspectives from a pharma and healthcare area. Are there any specific challenges that you face as an industry? And then maybe also ladder it back to CTV specifically, right? What gaps persist? Are there fragmentations, inconsistent data sets that you're seeing? I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, pharma's an interesting space. There's no point of sale for pharma brands, right? So the litmus test for your investment and for your media is a little bit different, right? Like we actually considered CTV to be a highly measurable channel, right? It provides a really great vehicle to sort of invest and reach the right audience, but then also tie those exposures back to real world outcomes, right? So it's just a sort of a different, like the goalpost is in a different space than other verticals or in a different part of the field, right? And dollars still flow to linear, but it's historically been measured differently. So if you think about the total TV ecosystem, there's some variability there in that sort of that real world sort of measurement component. So we're starting to see, I think, at least in the pharma space, a reevaluation of what that mix should look like in terms of linear versus CTV.
Yeah, I would just add to that too, and because we have a number of healthcare clients, right? There's creative lengths that we have to overcome.
Yep.
There's compliance internally at clients that have to get cleared. So there's a lot more regulation and clearances that have to happen, especially if you onboard a new CTV partner, that have to happen in the healthcare space. And we've had to push our partners. I work really closely with a lot of our partners to allow them to use partners like Swoop or some of the other players in that space to allow them to do the measurement that we need in the healthcare category. So just a bit, obviously there's a bit more in terms of the regulatory constraints that we have to work through. But I would say we've made a lot of progress in the healthcare space, in CTV specifically.
Certainly. I think there's a lot to learn from the pharma industry in terms of all of the barriers that need to be broken through in order to achieve success. And I think it's an area where I think we'll continue to see innovation happening. I'm really excited to see how it evolves with time.
Yeah, so are we.
Pete, going back to current challenges with measurement in CTV, and you sit in a really interesting spot because you're tied to the pipes with AppLovin. You've got access to so much data. Would love to get your perspective on how you're thinking about measurement in the world of CTV.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. And one of the things, if I step back, right, I've been in this industry for 20 years, coming from the display side and moving into CTV, it was immediately apparent that fragmentation, walled gardens, inconsistent data, and how you're actually measuring outcomes is still a challenge. And that also presents itself an exciting opportunity. And so, when we think about inconsistent data, a lot of times data that's misclassified in the bid stream that's coming from publishers. So, an advertiser might think they're buying a family-friendly programming that actually may have unfriendly content within it. So brand safety is important. I think another challenge is that we're all trying to figure out is attribution as a click, right? You get secondary pages from the likes of Meta and others that are taking credit. Well, who actually deserves the credit, right? And I think, Maureen was talking about what brands and executives care about. I think the love language of most brands is how do we get incremental growth and how do we do that profitably? So if data is being misclassified and then it's being mismeasured, that can create problems for that inconsistent metadata. So I think we really have a long way to go, but we're making progress at how we're measuring outcomes. And then obviously again, performance and attribution remains a hurdle in CTV, but it's something because of the data that we have access to from whether some of our programming partners. The data, the demand that gets sent to our inventory from AppLovin, we're really thinking about and finding solutions, and to solve that. And I think contextual targeting is a way to help close the performance gap on CTV. And then we're innovating around this, and we're really excited about how we can help solve some of this. So we want to move the industry forward.
Yeah, and thinking about moving the industry forward, Maureen. In our prep call, one of the things we talked about, and it's not always the exciting innovations, but sometimes it's the standards that can help move us all forward. And one of the things we've worked on outside of this is the Ad Creative ID framework with the IAB Tech Lab, with SIM, a lot of our partners across the industry. Would love to get your perspective on that. How do you think about the importance of ASIF Ad ID and the role that plays in measurement for CTV?
I think it's really important, I think, to have that level of consistency and being able to have the ad ID across all screens so that we can improve. I think number one, transparency. How do we help improve? That's been an obstacle, right, for agencies and marketers, like to make sure that we have the best amount of transparency that we can have. And then to your point on true cross-screen measurement using the ad ID. I just think it needs more awareness, and that, again, I don't know exactly where we're at in terms of the penetration across all the different marketers, but I do think it needs more awareness, and it needs more implementation. But I think it's really important to get to that level of consistency that we need to overcome some of the obstacles that we've had in the space.
Absolutely. Consistency and transparency. I think that's two things that the entire industry can get behind for sure. Two other things, when we think about CTV, automation versus customization. And Kurt, I know this is an interesting space for you because it's tough to automate when it comes to pharmaceutical and healthcare advertising. How are you thinking about automation versus customization?
Yeah, I think we try to make this one of those both answers, right? We try to bring a custom approach. Every segment that we build is built to spec for our pharma marketers, right? And the reason for that, quite simply, is that every brand is unique, right? You may be a first-line therapy, you may be a second-line therapy. Even if you treat the same condition, you're ultimately pursuing a different target, right? So customization is sort of fundamental to our business model. But at the same time, we built a really great sort of factory, right, to produce these audiences in an automated and efficient way to get them into the hands of the advertisers that need them quickly without prolonging, right, the ability to target and the ability to move quickly and dynamically.
Maureen, what about you?
I think to this point, there's both, but we need to start with standardization to lead us to automation, right? To get us to a point where we're working smarter and faster, I think we're still really behind in how do we make sure we are automating as much as we can, because we're still bogged down in a lot of manual work. So we're leaning towards this idea of like standardizing certain tasks, right? Whether it is just things like the audience activation, entering an IO, traffic sheets. There's just a lot of that work that has got to get standardized and automated so that then we can do the customized work that our clients demand and deserve, quite honestly. So I think we've got to get some of those basics right to get to the automation, and then obviously doing a lot of the customization on top of that.
Absolutely. So when I think of automation, one thing that comes to mind, and I feel like it wouldn't be a panel today if I didn't ask about, right, how is AI impacting the consumer journey with CTV? And Pete, when we talked about this previously, I loved your answer. So I'd love for you to share with us your thoughts on that, and then we'll get to our final question.
Great. And I want to say I wholeheartedly agree with Kurt and Maureen. There's a lot everybody in this industry can agree upon and scale, or really more standardization and automation. I think will help accelerate that. But, in our industry, we often talk about tech and data and audiences. Like I think of, and we think of Wurl starting with the consumer. Consumers could care less about AI unless it's in their personal lives to make tasks more efficient. And I think we have to start talking about, what's creating the best experience for consumers, because the way audiences find brands, or audiences are looking for a deluge of content that's being thrown at them, is really changing. So I think, to the point earlier, automating things, finding standards is critical for advertisers to reach those consumers in those premium moments with relevant content that helps drive those business outcomes. So, I'm a big proponent of starting with a brand first. And it's not to say that we're not already doing that, but I think that there's a way to put that on steroids, and AI helps us accomplish that goal.
That's great. All right, so we're just about at time here. One final question. So for each of you, in 1 to 2 sentences, what advice do you have for an advertiser looking to invest in CTV for the first time so that they can maximize their ROI. We always like to leave our audiences with some best practices. So, Maureen, 1 to 2 sentences. What's your advice?
Understand, have a clear set of objectives, have a clear understanding of your audience, and test and learn your way into the space.
Pete?
Lean in and don't be afraid to test and experiment.
And Kurt, the final word.
Yeah, I'd say take your learnings from other verticals, right? Apply the best of what's worked in other channels, bring it to CTV, and then, select partners that give you the scale and the ability to optimize, right, to the things that matter the most.
Beautiful. So Maureen, Pete, Kurt, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you to everybody who joined us on the webinar today. We hope to see you this Thursday. Don't forget to register for the rest of our series on thevab.com. Thank you all and take care.
Thank
Thanks
you.
much.